and welcome to today's webinar on creating resilience in children that will foster their potential and increase their success in the world. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeastern Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, housed at Rutgers School of Health Professions and Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Kathy, and I'm the project coordinator of this center, and will be co-facilitating this webinar today with my colleague, PJ Wenger. The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health and other related workforces to deliver evidence-based and empirically supported practices to individuals with mental illnesses. Please visit the MHTTC website for additional information at mhttcnetwork.org. Next slide, please. If you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products the Northeastern Caribbean MHTTC is providing, please sign up to receive our email communications. You can sign up at the bit.ly link provided on the screen. Following the webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform future activities. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to the completion of these surveys. So we thank you in advance for your feedback. We also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website along with the PowerPoint slides in the next few days. We encourage you to interact with our presenter during the webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A times towards the end of the presentation. During the webinar, our presenter may pose questions to you, so please use the chat feature to answer those questions. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. All material appearing in this presentation, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is in the public domain and may be reproduced or copied without permission from SAMHSA or the authors. Citation of the source is appreciated. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the presenters and don't reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS or SAMHSA for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. Now let's begin our webinar. We have PJ Wenger with us today. PJ is our Center School Mental Health Lead and Senior Training and Consultation Specialist. She has over 29 years of experience working in the field of mental health and has spent a considerable amount of time in a variety of settings developing her counseling practice. These settings include psychiatric emergency, inpatient treatment with both adults and children, in-home counseling and mental health issues, residential treatment, schools, and private practice. In the school setting, PJ has worked at the elementary, middle school, and high school level. In addition to his experience, PJ has been a trauma responder at the local, state, and national level. She has responded to large events like 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy, as well as traumatic events that affect schools, such as suicides, traumatic deaths of staff, students, and homicides. PJ is licensed by the New Jersey State Board of Family and Health Practitioners and is a certified member of the National Board of Certified Counselors. She has a master's in counseling and an EDS in marriage and family therapy. So welcome everyone, and I will turn it over to our presenter, PJ.
Thank you everyone for being here. And we'd like to thank Project Launch.
PJ, also, you're muted.
Okay. Yep. I
cannot hear you.
I'm not muted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
I apologize. We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can hear me? Okay. Oops. All right. Sorry about that. Little technical difficulties. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to thank Project Launch and also the Virgin Islands Department of Health for having us here today. I like to start my parent webinars with this quote. Is one of my favorite quotes. It's not the child's responsibility to teach the parent who they are. It's the parent's responsibility to learn who the child is. And I really like this because it speaks to how much our children will teach us if we open our minds and our hearts and our ears and remember that every child is different and unique. And so the journey of parenting is a very difficult one. So I tell everybody, pat yourselves on the back because this is not an easy job. It's one of the hardest jobs you have. There is no cookbook, there is no script, and there are, no perfect way to do this. So if done in a healthy manner, we start with parenting. If done in a healthy manner, we will build resilience. And if the children have resilience, they will become successful. So this is a journey. It's not a sprint, but a marathon. And we really have to be in for the long haul. So when we define resilience, we're really talking about that ability for our children to overcome something that's happened to them, a misfortune or a change. It's the ability to handle things that go wrong and grow from that experience. And that's really what we want our children to do. And so there are 7 crucial C's, I call them. And in the chat box, if you can you think of a word that begins with C that you think would contribute to a child's resilience? Kind of asking you to think outside the box a minute and really think about what those elements would be. I'll give you a few minutes maybe to put some things in the courage. That's a good one. Anyone else have one? I'll let you add into those as I begin. So our first one of our crucial C's is competence. And I have creativity. Absolutely. Creativity is a piece of this. Confidence. Absolutely. So that was our second one. So yay for the person who put confidence in that, Rochelle. So our next one is connection. We sometimes miss that one. And character. We're always talking about character in schools, but character really begins at home. I have compassion. Absolutely. That's contribution is one of ours. When we're talking about our 7 C's, coping, the ability to cope, and also control. And these are our 7 C's. And this concept was developed by Dr. Ginsburg, who is a pediatrician who has spent countless hours working with children from all walks of life, including children from affluent homes to children with no homes living on the streets, to children living on a Lakota Native American reservation. And when I started as a counselor, I really began seeing that when I was working with children, I realized that parents were really in need of some help as well. Because again, there's no book for parenting. And so sometimes we feel like we're out there sort of floundering. And when I was able to work with both sides, the children and the adults, I realized that my work was much more successful. So it was about that time that I read Dr. Ginsburg's first book, which is But I'm Almost 13, Raising a Responsible Adolescent. And I was sort of hooked. And his subsequent books supported my approach to counseling that I did. So we're going to identify each of these. We're going to explore them a little bit differently so that we can delve into them. And I'm going to go through this a little quickly, but we're going to ask you to participate in the chat. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A. So what does competence look like? Competence looks like the ability to handle situations effectively. And we want to build a set of skills that allow children to really trust their judgments and make responsible choices and face difficult situations. And that's what this is all about. So strength building. when we think about strength building, we think about children being able to master tasks, being able to do things, tackle challenges, the ability to stick with things when there's a problem. And a child gains confidence when they build those skills. So for instance, if a child is building a sandcastle on the beach in the sand, and the ocean comes and it washes it away and they build it again, they are building tenacity. If we jump in and build it again for them, they do not develop that tenacity. So we're actually not helping them to build that piece that is going to do the resilience piece, to build the resilience. So we really want to make sure that we're not correcting them by saying, don't build your sandcastle there, but make them question themselves. Where do you think would be a good place to build the sandcastle? Knowing that the tide is coming in, where do you think that would be a good place? And I help direct them, but I don't dictate. I don't tell them what to do, because if I keep telling children what to do all the time, then they don't learn how to do things themselves. And I really want to teach that problem solving. Avoid mistake focusing. When the sandcastle's built and the ocean washes it away, I don't want to sit there and say, oh, well, you build it right next to the water. What did you expect? I want to say, okay, so now what are we going to do? And in order for them to be able to do these things, I want to help them. And so I use the acronym PASTA. So if you can remember the acronym PASTA, I'm a big foodie. So PASTA stands for pause and breathe. P. A, ask yourself how you feel. So I'm going to ask my child how they feel that their sandcastle got blown away. And they're probably going to be sad, or they're going to be angry, they're going to be frustrated. The S in PASTA is, okay, tell me the emotions that you're feeling right now, because I want them to connect to their emotions. And then I'm going to ask them to think about their feelings. That's the T. And then the last A is ask yourself what you need to help you move forward. And the child might say, well, I need you to bring me buckets of water or bring me buckets of sand so that I can rebuild it. So again, we're building up their strengths and their mastery by allowing them to problem solve and master events. We're recognizing their strengths. Do we know what our child's strengths are? And we don't need them to be strong in every area. We really want them to be able to say, I'm really good at this. And some of the things I'm not so good at, and that's okay, because I can work at those things. So again, building skills. I don't have to know how to do everything. And when I'm talking to kids, I really equate it to learning a sport. You don't get on the basketball court and suddenly become a basketball star. You have to learn how to dribble, and you have to learn how to pass, and you have to learn how to dribble with the ball, and you have to learn how to make a basket. And so it's building skills. The other thing is we have to let children fall. So we need to let them make mistakes so they can figure out how to solve that problem when they fall and how to pick themselves up. So I always use the scenario when we're in a room and there's a toddler running around and the toddler falls down. If the whole room goes, oh, the child will start to cry because they're responding to our reactions. However, if we kind of giggle, barring that they're not bleeding, if we kind of giggle and say, oh, you fell down, how are you going to pick yourself up? The child's like, oh, okay, I'm okay. I fell, I can pick myself up, and that leads us into being overprotective. Especially parents I see with first children, they're very overprotective. By the time they get to child 4 or 5, it's like, oh yeah, I know this already. So we really want to watch that we don't overprotect them, because they really need to have those mistakes. They need to fall. They need to be able to pick themselves up. And if you come from a family where there's lots of kids, we want to make sure that we're not comparing them, because that does not foster resilience. That actually fosters shame and guilt. And we don't want to do that. We really want to stay away from those things. So the next one is confidence. Somebody said confidence in the chat box. And what does confidence looks like? And that is, do I see the best in my child, or do I see the worst? So do I praise them that they tried to make me breakfast, or do I focus that they made a complete mess of the kitchen? And that's very tough. You walk out, your kitchen's a mess, and there's dirty dishes and flour and everything all over. Your first reaction is like, oh my God, what did you do? But they're sitting there with this breakfast on a plate for you. And again, I have to acknowledge that best and not the worst. Do we acknowledge qualities versus achievements? You know, is it all about the grades, or are we actually identifying, are they creative, or can they think out of the box, and are they trying? And that's an achievement. And we really need to stop looking at achievement as test scores and test grades and A's or B's. We really need to look at it as, you know, did you do better than the last time? Okay, so you had a spelling test. This time you got 6 wrong. Last time you got 10 wrong. That's better. That's an improvement. And praise. And Christy, my co-worker, colleague who is on the line with us, did mention that last week, praising them for specific things, not praising them because they're a good artist, but praising them because they use color in a really creative way, or they did something with Play-Doh or clay that was really creative. It's really specific praising and catching them when they're doing something good, when they're sharing with their sibling or they're sharing with their neighbor. Oh, that was really good that you were sharing. It's stretching. It's asking children to stretch a little beyond their comfort zone. And sometimes we have a hard time doing that as adults. You know, sometimes we're not comfortable, and so we don't stretch. And that is, when I reach my level of discomfort, can I go a little further? And you'll hear me say a lot during this presentation that as adults, we need to model for children so that they see this. And there's very much a difference between pushing them to take on more than they can handle so they can fall and lose confidence, or encouraging them. So a lot of times when I'm dealing with teenagers, there's a lot of parents who are pushing teenagers to take all these advanced placement classes, and they take so many classes that they're overwhelmed and they're actually falling apart. And again, that then equates to, I can't do it, I'm a failure, all of these things based on shame, versus how about we balance between a couple advanced placement courses and a couple maybe regular courses. You know, do we criticize or correct? And that's a very different thing. Do we focus again what is wrong or what they did well? And again, I've said avoid shaming, and it's really hard sometimes with some of the things we say, because sometimes we react and we need to breathe and then react. So what does connection look like? So I'm going to ask you in the chat box, because connection is something that is so important. So in the chat box, think about what you do with your child to connect. What does that connection look like? So if you can just think about a couple things that you do with your children that forms a connection, what would they be? Anybody put a couple things in the chat box before I bring up my connection? Okay, so give you some ideas. Okay, I have biking, and biking is bonding time. Absolutely. So connection really looks like a place where it's safe for my child to be with me. And safety has to be emotional, physical, all of that. So again, if biking is a time to connect, you're both doing something and you're both feeling safe, and it's a time when you can share. I tell parents a lot of times the best way to connect with teens is take them on a drive. For some reason, teens in the car seem to open up and they connect with us and share with us. Emotional expression. We want to make sure that when our children are emoting, that we allow the space for them to do that, so that we're not saying, oh, you can't do that, or, oh, you know, we don't want to minimize their feelings, because if we minimize those feelings, and we'll talk about talking to our children, then they won't express things to us, and we want to be careful about that. Addressing conflict. You know, how do we address conflict? Do we work to resolve problems, or do we do things like silent treatment or yelling or fighting? You know, I was just on a session last night where the parent said to me, my daughter came to me, daughter's 5 years old, and said, Mommy, tomorrow, can you and Daddy not argue? Can we have one day where you don't argue? And it was such an epiphany for her, because again, lots of arguing, children watch that, then they don't know how to solve conflict if there's constantly arguing. So how do we do it? And that's, again, that modeling. We have to teach children how to do it. Family time. And I have a little, I'm going to show you a thing. People always talk about family time, and sometimes it's parents always telling children what family time is going to look like. It's really important to get the investment of your children by letting each one of them sometimes have a turn to decide what we do as a family, something that they think is fun, pride in our culture. This is a really important place where we connect in our culture, in our communities, in spiritual communities, in our communities that we have in our towns, things that we do together. And this also will lead into some of the contribution stuff we'll talk about, but definitely pride in culture. They need to belong. That's an important piece. And we don't want to be jealous of others. Sometimes when our kids get involved with other people, we feel like they're leaving us, or, we want them back, or we want more of their time. And we have to be careful about that, because that helps them grow. That helps them have experiences. And we want to make sure that they do that. The protection we talked about, do we overprotect? Because that doesn't help our children learn how to solve problems. It doesn't help them learn how to pick themselves up when they fall. So these are all things that are important. Then we go on to character. Character really starts at home. I know lots of schools teach character education lessons, but it really starts at home. How do I affect others? When I have a child and she hits her brother, instead of screaming at them and everybody go to your room and I'm taking all the phones, I sit down. How do you think he felt when you hit him? We have a conversation. We want children to recognize how their behavior affects other people. When they say something that's hurtful to us, and I tell parents all the time, I can say to my child, I love you right now, but what you said really hurt me, and I need a little time to process that, because it made me very sad. So again, we're starting with I love you, but we're saying what you did and said was not okay. Recognizing my caring self. What does that look like? When you care for somebody, what does that look like? What does it look like when I do it? Again, that modeling, when I care for somebody else. Clarifying values. What are our values? And when children don't align with our values, it's not a battle of the wills. It's really having a conversation. What are you thinking? What am I thinking? How can we come to some middle of the road so that you're not having any values? Do children know the difference between right and wrong? Oftentimes parents really think their kids do. And when I have children in treatment with me, sometimes I say, like, what are your chores at home? What are the rules? And kids can't tell me. And then I go to the parents and they say, oh no, here's all the rules. And then I go back to the child and they're like, no, that doesn't happen, or this doesn't happen. And we have to have a meeting where we really talk about, what are the rules? What is right and wrong? What happens when I do those things? And again, consequences are very important, but it can't always be, I have a knee-jerk reaction and I take the phone, which is what I say a lot of parents do. Community, how are they involved in the community? How are we involved in the community? And that's a real important thing. Racial or ethnic biases, we're certainly seeing in our environment in the world today, in our climate, that these things affect our children so tremendously. And so, we need to teach positive interactions with people of different cultures and races so that our children can see that and do that as well. Children are actually really good at it when they're young. They learn some of this from us. So we have to be really careful. And considerations. What kind of considerations do we need to have? Considerations for other people, considerations for ourselves, considerations for the environment. And those are all important things that build resiliency. And then contribution. Here is something, how do we give back to the world? And that's a really important thing for kids to learn how to do. We don't need a reason to help each other. I love this quote, because what I do when I'm working with teenagers is I challenge them, or children, I challenge them. What can you do in service? And even my little ones can do something that helps the world. I know I've gone to several, marches, women's marches, and marches for civil rights and things like that, where there are lots of signs. People come with lots of signs. And I love all the stuff on the signs. And I love that the children are there also making the signs and learning right alongside of the adults. So again, how do we act in service, and how do we deal with some of the world inequities? How do we change the world? Children are really the future. And I believe that so much, because we're going to change the world, but they're going to change it also. And so it starts when they're young. How can you change the world? Taking kids on a cleanup of the beach, or taking children on a cleanup of the street. Little contributions. During COVID, we challenged our young people to really take on some kind of new project that would help others. And again, we were 6 feet social distance. We, couldn't be around each other, but they did things. So I had a group of teenagers who actually learned to knit, and were knitting scarves for the homeless. Now, the scarves were not the best knitting projects that I've ever seen. Their hearts were in the right places, and the scarves were usable. So again, it's not about how well they do it. It's about that they do it, and providing opportunities for them to do that. Everybody was locked in their houses for months. So how can we help other people? So some of the younger children had a letter campaign. And again, their letter writing is not great, but they were drawing pictures and sending them to people that didn't have anybody to visit, or were in their houses alone, or were in nursing homes, so that they weren't forgotten. And exemplars. Who are the people who are doing some really good stuff? And there are people out there doing some really good stuff. What does coping look like? How do we teach our kids how to cope? So I ask parents, how do you cope? So again, if you want to, put in the chat box how you cope, we teach children how to cope by how we cope. So one of the things is, I had a parent who, when they were really angry, they went running. And I said to them, does your child know that you run when you're angry? That's how you cope with being angry. And they were like, well, I don't know. I never talked to them. And when I talked to the child and I asked the child, they said, oh, daddy's always leaving to go running. And so when I sat the two of them down together, and I had the father explain to the child why he ran, so that he could get some of that anger and frustration out that he experienced at work all day, so that he could come home and be present for them, the child, it was like a revelation. Oh, so running when you're angry is a way to handle anger. Yes. So again, we have to teach our children, how do we do that? And I always ask parents when I see children, how do people handle emotions in your home? Because you're going to ask me to teach your child coping skills, but I need to know what they're seeing and what they're learning. So again, the modeling, and a crisis versus an emergency. What is a crisis and what is an emergency? They're very different. There was a child who called 911. There's a video online. I wish I had it. Would be great to show. A video online. The child calls 911 to order a pizza. So the police show up. They were very good about it, with a pizza. And the child said, well, I was really hungry. It was an emergency. And so that was a really educational moment. But again, we have to teach those things. So the child learned what 911 is, but it's not for ordering pizzas. Playing, how do they play? Because children learn how to cope with the play that they do. So playing for children is a really important piece, and us playing with children is a really important piece. When we tell children to just stop, that doesn't help anything. Oops, sorry. When we tell children to just stop, that doesn't help anything. So that I tell people, like if they're crying and we say, just stop, that doesn't work. How do we handle negative behaviors? Negative behaviors are a child's way of communicating with us. So we have to figure out what they're communicating. They're not just doing something bad to do it. They're trying to communicate something to us. And that could just be as simple as, I just need your attention. And how do we care for self? Because we need to teach children how to do it so that they don't grow up and don't take care of themselves. Control. I know that Christy talked about this last week, about making decisions and having some choice. Random versus actions. do I randomly do things, or are my actions, what's the consequence of my actions? And children need to know the difference. And sometimes we need to walk them through the steps, taking responsibility. Children don't learn responsibility if I don't give them responsibility. And I can start really young giving children responsibility. Pick up your toys. Do you want to have your snack now or have it later? I give children choices that I know that I can live with, but gives them a decision-making power. And by doing this, I give them some control, and I also teach them how to make decisions. Do you want to play for a half hour and then do your homework? Do you want to do your homework and then play for a half hour? Again, a choice. Children learn that they can't control the world. And that's a really important piece, because a lot of anxiety comes from wanting to control. We want to control the future, and sometimes we can't do that. And that's an important piece to teach children. But again, as parents, we're always trying to control conditions because we want to protect our kids and we want to make sure they're okay. One step at a time for the future. Things happen one step at a time. We don't have to do everything at once. And discipline. Are we teaching or punishing? Because discipline should really be about teaching children something. It should not be about punishment. And then again, do we reward their responsibility? When they do things that are responsible, do we reward it? Talking to our children. And this is a really important piece. I see children all the time, and the first thing they tell me is that nobody listens to them. Their parents don't listen. And what I know, because I do family and couple therapy, is that when our children are talking to us, in our head, we're trying to think of the solution because we want to help them and we want them to be okay. And we stop listening. And sometimes children just want to talk to us. So for example, the child who comes home and says, Michael hit me in the playground. And right away, we want to pick up the phone and call the school and say, my child was hit in the playground, and what happened? And why did you let that happen? And what was the consequence? And the child is mortified and will never talk to us again. But if we say, okay, what do you want me to do about that? And the child says, I don't want you to do anything. I just wanted to tell you. Okay. So the next day he comes home and this kid has hit him in the playground again. All right. What can you do? I help him problem solve. I can tell the teacher. Okay, what else can you do? I can tell the playground aide. Okay, what else can you do? I can tell him to stop, that it hurts. Okay, great. He goes to school. He tries all those things. Nothing works. The child hits him again. Then, of course, as a parent, I have to say, okay, you've tried everything you can try and you did a really good job, but it's not working. And mommy or daddy now needs to go to the school and figure out how we can make this better. But I don't jump at the first report. I let them try to problem solve and figure it out. Validate how they're feeling. We may think their feelings are kind of silly, but saying that to a child only produces shame. So again, we want to stay away from that shame. Teenagers, they break up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend and it's the end of the world. And we're saying to them, oh, you'll have plenty of boyfriends or girlfriends. You don't have to worry about that. That person didn't treat you very well. That doesn't help a teenager. It helps if we say, that must be awful for you. Tell me about it. And they will talk. But, again, we have to validate those feelings. And we have to trust that our children have some ability to communicate, that we've taught them right or wrong, that, we have to trust them to be able to go out there and do some things. If we teach them all these things and then we keep them at home, we don't let them experiment with anything, then they don't learn. Stop dictating. We always want to tell children what to do because we as adults think that we know the best, and we might. But at the same time, as soon as I start telling children what to do, they sort of turn off. It's like a husband and wife sometimes when I have a couple in the room and they're like, they're always telling me what to do. Yeah, because as soon as they start telling me what to do, I turn off. And I have to teach them that dynamic because it doesn't work, but it doesn't work with children either. Praising, controlling our emotions. If our child comes home and they've done something bad at school and we are ready to just pounce on them because we're so angry, we really have to go, I need to step out. I need to breathe. I need to handle my anger. And then you and I will come and talk about it. And it works in reverse. When a child is so upset, they cannot problem solve. So we need to help them regulate their emotions to a balanced place before we can have the conversation about, okay, what happened and what are we going to do? Doing things together. And it's not always what we want to do. It's sometimes what they want to do. And really watching our children. We learn so much if we just watch them. So again, resilient children equals positive mental health. I can't stress this enough. And so when we have these things that are listed here, and again, you see model at the bottom, because it's always very important. These are the things that help children really develop positive mental health. And they're right in line with our 7 C's. So I'm just going to go through them fairly quickly because I want to be mindful of time. So building emotional connection. So we want to be their friend versus their parent. When we are our kid's friend, it's not very helpful. They feel safer and more connected to us when we are being a parent. Individual time versus family time, they need both. And we need both. We need individual time as much as family time. The device epidemic, I've always spoken to. We need to really shut down devices, not only for ourselves, but our children, and not let the device be the interaction. I actually had mother-daughter in therapy the other day, and they've been texting each other upstairs, downstairs. And the mother is very frustrated. And I said, we have to stop the texting. If you want to talk, you have to come up to the bedroom or ask me to come down. That's how we have a conversation, not on the phone. And again, a biggest thing that we can do is get quiet. Again, children always tell me nobody's listening to them. I have parents who bring children to therapy and they're like, they're not going to talk to you. They don't talk to anybody. And the door closes and the child is what I call verbal vomit. They're just spilling their guts. And after 45 minutes, when the session is over or an hour, I walk out and the parent says, how'd they do? I said, perfectly fine. They talked to me the whole time. And the parent's surprised. But when I work with parents, I tell them if we get quiet, they will talk. If we talk at them or we tell them what to do, they won't talk. So this is just one of the family fun worksheets, and it's on the Padlet. So I have a Padlet of resources for you. But when we talk about planning fun things for kids to do, this is a little worksheet that you can all sit down and do. And it's really fun because kids get to tell you what they think that the family has done that has been fun. And they get to tell you what they think is fun. And then we take turns doing the activities that each person in the family wants to do. And 2 things happen. Children have, again, some power and control in decision making, and they learn that their opinion and their thoughts count. We stretch because some of those things are not anything we want to do. So they see us stretching and then they will stretch. And so again, use this fun family worksheet. Promote healthy risk taking. We're all concerned that children are going to grow up and they're going to take bad risks like smoking or drugs or drinking. We help that by teaching them how to take healthy risks. And how we do that is trying something new. And we have to, again, model. We have to be able to do that. Try something new. Let them try something new. Show them that, hey, it's difficult. But we keep trying, even talking to a shy person, talking to somebody that we don't know. And again, I'm not saying we talk to strangers, but again, if there's somebody in the group, we want to include them, and we have to step out of our safety zone to be able to do that. And engaging in activities that are risky but healthy. So normally I have a picture of people parasailing here or skydiving. And again, that's not anything that everybody would do, but it certainly is an activity that would stretch. We have to stop fixing and saving our kids because, again, if they fall down and we're constantly picking them up, they do not learn how to pick themselves up. So we do that by helping children problem solve. When they have a problem and they come to us, instead of us giving them the solution or the answer, we need to help them solve the problem. And again, we can give them some ideas about what we think is good, but we don't tell them. So I might do a pro and con list. What are the pros of the decision you're making? What are the cons? What goals, what do you want to see come out of this? And if this is the end goal, how do we get there? Have them do a solution wish list. What do you want to see happen? Okay, so if that's what you want to see happen, how do we get there? And then who can help? That's a really important piece because when we help children identify who can help, we let them know that asking for help is okay and that they can do that. And then they can ask us for help and they can ask other people for help. Addressing emotions. Emotions are not the bad guy. And again, we have to model what emotions look like for us. If I'm angry and I come home and I scream at the whole house, children learn to do that. They do it with each other. They do it with kids at school. It's not a healthy response. If I can do something else like, punch a punching bag or going for a run, but I identify for the child, like mommy's feeling sad right now. She just maybe needs to watch a sad movie or lay down and take a nap. This is how I handle that emotion. It's same when we're happy. And that's how I tell kids, when you're happy, what do you do? And it's real easy for them to identify. I laugh, I giggle, I'm smiling. Okay, great. So what do you do when you're sad? Then there's a pause, because sometimes they don't know how to do it. And if we grow up in a home where emotion is not dealt with in a healthy way, or emotion is not dealt with at all, they don't learn how to do it. So we really have to teach them. And the good thing about children is they really just tell you it like it is. It's why sometimes when you're at a funeral, children will say something and it makes everybody laugh, because they're in that innocent place of, this is in the moment how I feel and I'm going to say it, and if we allow that, then they learn to handle their emotions, and again, we don't tell them emotions are bad. I grew up in a house where, my father would get very frustrated if people cried, like stop crying all the time, and I had to learn as I got older and did my work to become a therapist, that crying was actually a really good thing. What I realized is it made him uncomfortable because he was, a serviceman, and they were very tough, and everything, was in order. And those kind of emotions were probably not helpful for him when he was in the service. But he carried it through. And so that was something that when my work, we had to work out. So again, it's affirming emotions, allowing them to have them, and then helping them to do something with them. Embracing mistakes. Mistakes are proof that we are trying. And that's how I always approach mistakes with parents. And sometimes when kids make mistakes, we are quick to be angry. So if they spill a milk, we sort of jump and we're angry that they spilled a milk. But if we can just breathe for a minute and go, okay, they spilled the milk. Okay, so what do we need to do so we don't spill the milk the next time? How do you clean it up? Do you need help? Where are the paper towels? Like those kinds of things. It's where if kids can't make mistakes, we raise children who always want to be perfect, and that condition does not exist. And so they become very down on themselves. Their self-esteem crumbles, their confidence crumbles. Again, sometimes we need to focus on the process and not the results. I studied really hard for the test and I got a C. I didn't get the A. All right, so we don't focus on the A, we focused on how well you studied and that you got a C. So there's room for improvement. It's okay. That's again, focusing on the process. And identifying the learning. Okay, so you spent an hour studying and you used place cards. Okay, so how can we do something different? And I really avoid the use of the word good and bad. It's real easy for us to get into that dichotomy, and I really avoid it, because then children are either good or bad. And then when they self-evaluate, they're in that place of good, bad, black, white. And a lot of times, if they're having problems with self-esteem or confidence, it's easier for them to go to the bad. And so I always use not so good or not so bad. It's very different than good, bad. And then again, model. We promote the illumination, I call it. So optimism versus pessimism. And when I'm doing this, I always say there's a neutral space. So it doesn't have to be optimistic, like happy, happy, joy, joy, or pessimistic, everything is bad, but somewhere in the middle. This is okay, this is not so okay, but we can deal with this, and helping children to really reframe their perception and reframing our perception. Okay, we don't need a child to get straight A's. We would like that, but when we push that, then again, children begin to think that if they do anything else but straight A's, that it's not good enough, and we develop that place of shame. So see how easy it is to go into that frame. A B plus, okay, a B, you tried. Let's see what we can do different. Who can help you? What do you need help with? You know, looking at things through another lens. Instead of the I can't lens, let's look through what can I do? Instead of the, I'm never going to be a good student. Let's look through, what about being a student? Am I what I do well? So again, looking through a different lens and reframing how we look at things and helping children to do that as well. I like this visual. It's on the Padlet for you. I tell parents, take a picture and keep it on your phone because it's everything that we want to do. We talked about praising for effort, strategies, progress, hard work, not for talent or being smart or those kinds of things, and the power of yet. I love this. When children say, I can't do it, the answer is you can't do it yet. But that's why we practice and that's why we learn. And I go back to that old adage of the basketball, you can't get out on the court and be a star right away. You have to practice. So this is just a cute little, guide for parents that I think is helpful to just give you those reminders, asking questions, how do we ask questions? Parents say, my child gets home from school. I say, how was school? And the kid says, okay. I'm like, right, because you're asking the wrong question. So why don't you ask, what was a good thing that happened at school today? Or what was a funny thing that happened at school today? Or what was something that really made you frustrated that happened at school today? Different way to ask them, different way to engage, different way to connect. These all build resilience. And this is my little short clip for all of the parents, and I hope you'll enjoy it.
Hey there, it's me, Louie. I just wanted to say.
Can you help Elma make a pillow fort,
Just
please?
a second, Elma. I'll be right there, son. It is wonderful to get to spend so much time with our children, but can also be a bit overwhelming. But I just wanted to say, parents, you are doing an amazing job. Remember, though, it's important to take some time for yourself. Take care of you. You can listen to your favorite song, stretch, or just take a moment to breathe. Come on, breathe with me right now. Huh? Take a slow, deep breath in, and then breathe out. It feels good, huh? We are all doing the best we can, and that is okay. No, it's better than okay. It's
Daddy!
Okay, son, I'm coming. Looks like I have to go. Time to make a pillow fort. You hang in there and keep up the great work.
Caring for each other. Visit sesamestreet.org/care for videos, activities, and tips for the whole family. Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help.
Sorry, guys. I don't know what happened there. Trying to get it to advance. Hold on. So let me.
Hey there, it's me.
Okay, little glitch here. So my last thought is, that we are really the beacon of light on a stable shoreline from which children can navigate safely the world. And we have to remember that we certainly don't want them to crash against the rocks, but trust that they have the capacity to learn to ride the waves on their own. So these are two quotes that I love about children that I try to have parents keep in mind as you go forward and really do what I call conscious, healthy parenting. So now we're up to the Q&A. If anybody has any questions.
Hi, PJ, could you pull up your screen again, please?
Is my screen not up? See, I'm looking at
No.
Okay, sorry. What are you looking at?
We're looking at all of the panelists.
Okay, sorry guys. All right, let me let me share my screen again. And here we go. All right. So I guess you missed my slide. Those were my two quotes. You can see it now.
Yes. thank
Little
you.
technical difficulty. Sorry about that, everybody. And now we're up to the Q&A, and I'm just going to put our evaluation code up while we do the Q&A in case people want to take a shot of that with their phones. Again, the surveys are how we pay for our, how we're able to offer these trainings for free. So I'll just let that up there. If we have any questions, I'll be happy to field them.
Thanks, PJ. So as PJ mentioned, the QR code that you see on your screen, you could take your mobile device. If you have a QR code reader, you can click on the QR code image and complete our very short survey, or you could also access the survey by using the bit.ly link that I entered in the chat box. And also, we'd like to invite you to ask PJ any questions that you might have on the strategies that she presented on. PJ, I have a couple of questions for you regarding I think it's the activities that is about connection. During the pandemic, a lot of children have felt that they have lost connection with their peers. Is there any way to foster some sense of community? I mean, whether virtually or using social distance, but a lot of the children are feeling disconnected from one another.
So I think a really good thing that's been working well with a lot of the youth that I work with is getting them to pick an idea that they can join together on. So again, if that looks like a cleanup at the park, and at the park, we can all be 6 feet away, but we can see each other, and that's a really important piece. Like I said, my teens were doing, they did a challenge. They knitted scarves for the homeless, and then they challenged another group of teams to do something else. So then virtually they were online, going back and forth with each other about how many scarves each group had done. Some of my other children have done things like the movie nights where they can do the free movies and they're all watching the same movie together from their houses. So we have to be really creative about how we get children together. For my teens who drive, I tell them, drive to somebody's house and stay in your car and have a conversation from the porch to the car. We can still do those things. But sometimes what I'm finding is that parents aren't going out of the house, and so children aren't going out of the house. And so we need to, again, that modeling piece, it is okay to go out of the house. We just have to maintain social distance and we have to wear our masks. But we can still do things with each other. So again, challenging, there was a group that had their Fitbits and they were challenging walking. So they were all going to the park where they could walk 6 feet apart from each other and counting how many steps they were in, challenging each other to do more each day. So I think we need to be a little creative about how we get kids together. I know when the pandemic started, everyone thought that children were going to be fine because they're always on their devices anyway. And what we're finding is that children aren't fine just with their devices. So it really is important to get them out of the house to do other things. And that's where, again, with the connection, learning new activities, trying new activities, doing things that we wouldn't necessarily do, like maybe hiking or taking walks, or maybe I know bike sales went through the roof. People are biking more, doing some of those things we don't do. And again, also engaging our children in asking them what they would like to do. We're going to have family time on Saturday morning. What would you like to do? And if they say, I want to go to the beach, and maybe we hate the beach, that's their choice. So we have to go along with them. And maybe the next time we'll say, well, I want to watch a movie at home, and it may not be their choice, but because we've all done it with each other, they're going to go along with it. So those are some of the ideas that I would have.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to one of the concepts about what control looks like. And you mentioned discipline teaching or punishing. How would you reframe that concept to also include natural consequences to behaviors?
So a lot of times how I would reframe that, the first thing I would say is that we as parents really need to avoid that knee-jerk reaction. I can't tell you how often I run into parents where every time a child does something wrong, they're taking the phone. And the child tells me, I lost my phone again. After a while, it doesn't mean anything because we're kind of having that knee-jerk reaction. It is okay as a parent to not know what to do in a situation and to take a step back and think about what we're going to do. So that's the first thing. It's okay to say to a child, at this time, I am so frustrated or I am so angry that I need to take a step back so I can think about how we can address this situation in a better way. And then again, children and parents cannot communicate if we're both not in a calm place to do that. So I step back, I recalibrate myself, I regulate myself, I give the child a moment to regulate themselves and calm down. Then I can sit down and the teaching comes from, so say the child, again, hit their brother. Teaching comes from, okay, hitting your brother is wrong and there's going to be a consequence, but I want to talk to you about what's going on that you're hitting your brother. And I talk to the child about, how do you think it feels when you hit your brother? And little kids will tell you, oh, well, it probably hurts his feelings and it probably hurts him physically. And then I ask, how do you feel now that you know that's how you made your brother feel? And they're like, oh, I'm kind of sad, but I was really mad. And I acknowledge the mad. And then I say, what can we do differently? And so again, I help the child problem solve through, instead of hitting my brother, what can I do differently? Maybe I can come to mom and say, brother's not being very nice and I didn't want to hit him, so I need help with communicating with him. And again, that's the teaching. It's not that I let children get away with everything and I don't have a consequence. I will have a consequence for hitting her brother. And sometimes I engage the child in it. So what do you think should be your consequence for hitting your brother? Sometimes kids are much harder on themselves than I would be. And so they come up with things that are really going to be impressionable for them. So, one child would say, oh, well, I'll write an apology letter. Okay, write an apology letter. Or I think I should go to bed early. Okay, so tonight you'll go to bed early. So sometimes if you engage children in the consequence, it's more meaningful to them. Again, you have to be careful of the age, because when they're adolescents, they'll think of something that's really easy for them and they'll think you'll go along with it. But again, that's the teaching piece of discipline versus the punitive piece.
Got it. So it's more of the debriefing part, the lesson, the discussion.
Mhm.
And like you said, it should be age specific because with certain age groups, the picking their consequence might not be so appropriate. Okay. Got it. Thank you so much. So we are at the top of the hour and I just want to say thank you. Thanks, PJ. And thank you to all of our attendees for being with us this evening. So we have our last workshop next Wednesday. And again, if you have registered for this one, you have indicated that you'd like to attend all three, you will be receiving a Zoom link to attend the third webinar next week. Do you have any final comments before?
I just want to say that I did create a Padlet with resources on it. That information is right here. And it does have some of the references that are really good, and it has some activities to do with your children to help build resilience. So it actually has some activities at different ages that you can do with your kids. So, and thanks everyone. Yep. Thank you everyone for joining us. And like Elmo's dad said, keep up the good work.
Yes, and we hope to see you next week, next Wednesday, again at 6 o'clock. And it will be on social emotional learning at home and in the community. And our presenter is Miss Christy Rydbalski. So we hope that you'll be joining us next week as well. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.